Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this panel discussion on data management, flow, and pipelines. We have very different, diverse background people coming here, so we'll start with the introductions. So I'll go first. My name is Prakhar Bajpai, and I am a senior data scientist at City of Austin. I have approximately 6 years of work experience in this field. So I maintain City of Austin's Center of Excellence, where we do a lot of advanced analytics and artificial intelligence based products. And nice to see you all, and I'm happy to talk with other panelists on this member. Razi, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Raziuddin. I'm co-founder and CEO of a startup called FeatureByte, based in Boston, and spent the last 20 years with data and analytics startups. I was with a company called Netiza, which was in the data warehousing space. And more recently, I was with a company called Data Robot, which is in the ML space. I was amongst the first dozen employees there. And at FeatureByte, we're basically solving the AI data problem. So,
thank you for coming here. My name is Praveen. I'm a machine learning engineer at DoorDash. Before that, I was at Pinterest. My expertise lies in building deep learning models for showing personalized recommendations. Before that, I was at CMU getting my PhD in mathematics, and prior to that, I was at Columbia. That's all.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chalamayya Batchu, Senior Enterprise Architect at Georgia Pacific, a paper manufacturing company. So my role is focused on mainly the data and analytics strategy that covers tools, technologies, frameworks, and standards.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maxim. I'm a solution engineer in Toloka AI. Before that, I was working in Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, in Accenture. So I'm pretty tech engineered here. Right now, in Toloka, I'm responsible for the data labeling and good quality data sets to collect them for our clients. So I bet this is why I'm here, to talk to you about the data.
Thank you so much, everyone. So let's start this discussion with some topic and discussion about data and what strategies are working for your organization. So let's start with Chalamayya. What do you suggest? What are some of the data strategies?
So a strategy is very important for any company. The first and foremost is business alignment to your data, right? Many people think data is after the fact, but today most of the enterprises are driven by data. So as a part of my role, we daily think about how do we ingest, how do we store, how do we manage, and how do we consume the data for analytics, for BI, AI, or any other applications that we do today. And it has become a core component of our enterprise because we manage data as an asset and not data as something after the fact. So most of us have heard about building data products, and we are in that journey right now on where we select data sets that would be used across the enterprise. We being larger enterprise with so many domains, subdomains. So we started building into data products, and that is helping us a lot on how do we manage, store, and ingest data in a more standard framework and a technology way.
Maxim, do you want to add something?
Yeah, so in Toloka, we're also responsible for the collecting the data and to providing the data for our clients, but I will try to cover another part. So how do we use the data, what's the strategy of the data collection inside of Toloka? So as a startup, we're right now focusing on two directions. The first one, either product-based, so to log information about the usage of our workers, our labelers inside of Toloka, to control to look at their behavior and to prevent some sort of fraud if it's possible. And the second one is to look at the sales direction and how are we doing with the in sales perspective, and hopefully we can do everything in one product. And this is one of our strategies here. Thanks.
Yeah, Razi, what about you?
yeah. So since we're a startup, we're we don't have massive volumes and scales of data, but we work, and I personally work with tons and tons of clients. And one of the questions that comes up very often is, just where do we start with the data? What should the strategy be? And there are two sort of truths that I've learned over the past couple of decades. One, I don't think there's any company that would say that they're happy with their data and their data strategy, right? And the second is that regardless of that fact, there's always some data that's pretty well curated, that's of high quality. And my advice to pretty much any company that's thinking about AI, ML, analytics, is to start with data that's pretty well curated, that's well understood, and get some success first, and then sort of branch out from there. Sell those successes within the company, within the enterprise, to different groups and to different divisions, and sort of scale from that point on. Trying to go at data that's maybe sort of on the fringes will, in most cases, then not end up in disappointment. So that's my 2 cents on data strategy.
Yeah, and I agree to this point that, and I think that's what we always feel in this field, right? Like the model development, actual artificial intelligence or ML model is just like 20% of the work, because the 80% of the work is actually trying to make sure that we have the data in the form and in the quality that can go through that ML pipelines and model deployment. So Praveen, what are your thoughts on this?
So from my experience, so I worked at places where there is a lot of data. So the problem that I am forced to deal with is, since I have so much data, usually storing data costs a lot of money. You have to store it into data like S3, so on and so forth. We have retention policies, right? Because we do not have unlimited resources to share, to save the data. In terms of storing the data, I agree with whatever Razi was saying a while ago. What is the data that you're storing that is important? To give you some context, I built deep learning models for showing relevant ads in the light of what Apple introduced in regards to the privacy changes. We'll come back to this again. So now platforms like Facebook, Snap, Pinterest, they are unable to track users on third-party websites. So it essentially means we have less features that are available to us. So if users are willing to share that data, great. Otherwise, we would have to work with whatever we have in showing personalized content to users.
Yeah, I think, and I think that's great insight from someone who has worked in this space, and I agree. And we are going to talk a little bit deeper in the session about the privacy and security. So the next topic I want to discuss with you guys is about some of the challenges that you face in data sourcing, and then we are going to transition to what kinds of tools or technologies that you guys use or you would like to suggest to our audience. So let's start with Maxim. Some thoughts on the challenges.
Well, I also try to cover this topic from our client perspective. So I would say a lot of our clients coming out to us just to label the existing data or to collect the data from the open sources. It's always really hard to train your ML model without data. So to do this, we see that 2 trends. The first one is like big tech companies who already have a lot of log data inside, so they could reuse the log of their products, and they don't really need something outside. Another approach is when you're trying to develop the new product, or you're just like small business and you don't need to store all of this information. You're trying to find the resources somewhere. One of the approaches like to use an open source data sets or to use synthetic data sets. But unfortunately, this is not the best approach because it's pretty limited. The quality of the open data sets could be pretty low. So that's why we are trying to use the human in the loop approach. We have a very diversified crowd. It's more than 1 million people working in 100 countries speaking 40 different languages. So we can work 24 hours a day. And especially my work is to guarantee the great quality of the final result. So you don't need to think about it, just use it as a service.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and then from the perspective, so I work for the city government, so our perspective is a little bit different from when you compare to like an enterprise, where because our effort is mostly preferred on making sure that whatever tools and models that we are developing, we are making them transparent, we are helping the residents of the city, as well as we are making sure that the government is being accountable. So for us, the data quality is one of the biggest challenge that we face, because some of the systems we have them from 90s. So I can give you a very quick example that the 911 system that the city of Austin had was made in like early 2000s. So all the data that was coming there was like very raw in form. So you can't do a lot of like model deployment on this unless you make significant changes to like the data quality, making sure that, and then in order to do so, you also have to make sure that you are not tampering with the data, because again, very important for city government to make sure that they are transparent. People of the city know what's going on. So that is like some of the perspective that I have on this. And then Chalamayya, what do you want to add on this?
Yeah, definitely. I think most of the people here would have faced those challenges in sourcing the data, right? So for a manufacturing company like us, we have a lot of manufacturing sites which are not having high bandwidth of internet, right? So we are 150 plus in US, and getting data from a manufacturing site to your cloud is one of the major challenge. Leaving the other challenges in regular data ingestion. So the first and the foremost is data is not cheap. We think, yeah, we have the data, we just do anything we want, but to collect the data from an edge could be a factory or a site, to your cloud, and then creating analytics on top of it is a very expensive effort. So it goes down to the foundations on some of the challenges on how do we upgrade our infrastructure at every level, be it cloud, be it on-prem, be it in middleware, right? So that was the greatest challenge we had, and it took almost 3 to 5 years for us to up the network infrastructure, up the cloud, up the internet at the local manufacturing sites. And the other thing in an enterprise, again, I'm just taking the other topics, is about the governance aspect, right? We have a lot of data from ERPs, a lot of data from IoT, a lot of data from other applications. So how do we govern the data? Who's responsible for the data? Who is changing the data? So all this come in the challenges of entire end-to-end data cycle. But data acquisition itself from site to the cloud was a major challenge. And the other challenges in a regular data ingestion is the different type of data integrations that are available in the market today. Be it API, be it JDBC, ODBC, be it a database, you have a different plethora of tools. And how we are trying to solve is using a framework-based approach and not picking an ETL tool or different type of tools for every other data integration. So we are going through a framework-based approach which supports most of your integration mechanisms, and you just go via configuration and not reinvent all the existing pipelines.
If I may add, I agree with Chalamayya in the sense that we have a lot of unstructured data. And in some sense, the promise of deep learning is to just feed the unstructured data, and the model would inherently learn the patterns that exist in the data. While in theory that sounds nice, but in practice, you still need to spend quite a bit of time doing feature development, right? To essentially feed these features into your model. So that is that is one challenge that I foresee. And for me personally, the biggest challenge that we face at big tech is, you have these models, really complex, sophisticated deep learning models, which are nice in the sense that you can do offline development, so on and so forth. But when you have to serve these models at scale, meaning let's say you go to facebook.com, they have to render the page in 450 milliseconds, right? 400 to 450 milliseconds, whatever that number is. So that's a relatively, that's the latency requirements are very high, right? So the challenge there is, how do you serve a model which is fairly complex, which does a great job at personalizing content, within a relatively short span of time. That's the challenge that I have to deal with.
Yeah, and I think if I may add to that, even for enterprise AI, where you may be just using classical ML instead of deep learning, and where the data volumes may not be quite the same as big tech. The feature engineering, feature deployment, so basically preparing data, deploying it in production, managing it, governing it, that's just a super, super challenge. I mean, I've been in this space for the past 10 years. The modeling part of the model lifecycle in many ways has been solved through technologies like AutoML. But when it comes to doing the hard part of ML, which is everything to do with the data, that is still very much sort of a manual process. There are just too many people involved. You've got data scientists and then data engineers, and the back and forth between those two just sort of brings the whole process to a grinding halt. That's the challenge that I live with day in and day out.
Yeah, and I think like these are some of the challenges that I think everyone in this room who have worked with data in any capacity have faced at some point of time. So let's continue the conversation around like tools and technologies and the frameworks that you guys use or you guys recommend. So let's start with Praveen. What are your thoughts on these things?
So let's separate the ML pipeline into several components, and then we could talk about each of these components in detail. So there is offline feature development. So you have ETL pipeline, so on and so forth. And then it also really depends on the use case that you have. So are you going to be serving this model online, meaning when you go to facebook.com, or let's say you go to google.com and then you search for something, Google needs to show relevant content to you, meaning it's an online model, right? So it's going to take in attributes real time, and then it's going to come up with relevant personalized content to you in real time. So it's a real time. This is being served in real time. You could have an offline model wherein you do not have the latency constraints. So the requirements, the kind of stack that you're going to have is really dependent on your use case. But at a high level, you have offline development, offline feature development, which involves ETL pipelines. As you know, you could use Spark, Hive, Databricks is a popular enterprise software that people are using these days. And then there is online feature serving. You essentially compute these features. Again, when it comes to online features, there are real-time features, there are batch features. I do not want to go into specifics. And then when it comes to offline model development, there are frameworks. There is TensorFlow, there is PyTorch that you can leverage to build your models. And the thing is, how do you deploy, the framework for deploying these models to production, and then finally to be able to serve these models. For example, if people are on AWS offers SageMaker as a feature serving, model serving framework. Similarly, GCP provides a framework for serving models. So yeah, these are the different components that involve the ML pipeline.
Yeah, and I think like it is very important for distinguishing between these two models, because like from the enterprise perspective, it is very important to understand like online versus offline and what kind of audience you have. Sometimes, for example, in my work, you have to define whether some kind of model has to be viewed by, let's say, like internal city staff or directors or like the higher city executives, versus there are some dashboards or some models and develop tools that has to be viewed by the public. So you always have to make sure that you understand your audience in terms of like that data literacy level as well, and then understand and create those frameworks around it. So maybe, Chalamayya, let's hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, being an enterprise, the tools and technology is one of the emotional topic, because everyone has their own, idea about this tool is better versus this technology is better. And coming up with so many data teams in our company, it was not that easy. So the way we approached the solution was a hybrid approach on open source with a managed open source, or with an enterprise software, right? Whether it's engineering, whether it's storing, whether it's the AI part, we mix and match these platforms. As I mentioned before, that is how we created a framework based on the use case, based on the value, based on the people available to you for working, that is how we decide this is your pattern to build your ML pipeline or ML code. Again, I'm not saying we are very maturely doing it. We are in the process of going that way. Now, the other important aspect for an enterprise is scale, right? We have 150 plus manufacturing sites. So one ML model deployed at one site has to be deployed at all the sites at the same time, because we predict how an asset is evolving, some safety concerns for people. There are a lot of things that are real time and also at offline on the prediction. So scale is an important factor, which is solved by cloud to a certain extent, but still your platforms or softwares have to support deploying models at large scale. So that is what we are doing at our organization today.
Okay, Maxim, what do you think?
Well, just to add here, there's so many clever thoughts was added before. My idea that I see that many companies right now do not try to invent or build something from the scratch, some products from the scratch, but to reuse the existing products on the market. And it really helps to speed up the whole processes, to be concentrated on the business you have to do and your key goal. And so in Toloka, we're also using the same approach. We're trying to use the open source products or the licensed enterprise products for the data gathering, data comparison of the different versions of the data, or building the dashboards. Yeah, that's what we do.
Razi, let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think when you think about architecture, data architecture especially, some of the things to consider is the space just keeps changing and evolving day in and day out, right? Both the business keeps changing as well as the technology and the frameworks keep evolving, and so it's super important to have an architecture that's very agile. The way I tend to think about this is think in terms of Lego blocks. So have a solid foundation that focuses on security, privacy, governance, but then be able to layer in different components as necessary and be able to sort of update different components of the stack as and when the data business needs evolve or technologies change. So having something that's very modular as an architecture is super, super important.
If I may add, I agree with Razi. One important component that we forgot to address is alerts, right? So now you have data, you have machine learning models, it could be an offline machine learning model, or you could have an online machine learning model that is serving real-time traffic. What kind of alert systems do you have to ensure that the system is not breaking down, right? So you have features. You've trained your model on offline data. Now you're serving real-time data. The feature distribution when you're serving online could be different from whatever the model was trained on, or for whatever reason, there was data corruption and the model's performance suddenly went down. What kind of mechanisms do you have to debug and monitor the metrics? I think this is extremely important. Again, we could classify this as having you could use Flink-based systems to set up real-time alerts. There are also enterprise softwares that people use to set up alerts. People also use feature distributions to monitor changes in feature distribution. I think this is an important thing. Standard alerts like a feature pipeline failed, emails being sent, so on and so forth. I think is also fairly commonly used.
Yeah, and I think one common theme that all of us covered in different ways is the difference between using an open source platform versus an enterprise level. So I want to put this question, let's say, start with Chalamayya, that if I am working for a very small startup and I want to understand what should be the approach. Should I start with the open source or should I buy an enterprise? I am very small scaled, maybe let's say 100 employers. What do you suggest from your experience? How should I approach this problem of having an open source versus buy a tool and then work on it?
Yeah, it always depends on the customer that you would like to serve, right? So when you use a enterprise software, you have some components already built in which would give you or accelerate value to the customer faster, versus using open source. You have to stitch those components together, create a framework or some architecture, as Razi mentioned, on the Lego blocks. So it always depends on how you want to grow as a startup. Should I invest in a platform or should I build a platform? So at the end of the day, your customer doesn't have to know whether you're using open source or enterprise software. As long as you provide the value to the customer in terms of product and the services, you should be good. The way we look at from Georgia Pacific is acceleration, right? How fast we get to the value. Should we buy or should we build? And there is always a constant analysis. Again, we don't go into analysis paralysis, but we do that at a high level on what is the best way to approach this problem, and then what is a better way to provide a solution.
Razi, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, agree 100%. I think it's, as a startup, and experience with startups before, usually startups are much more engineering driven. And so it's easier to just get open source technologies and stitch some stuff together and make it work. Startups are usually also very budget constrained, much more so than even large enterprises. And so, we have to work with whatever is available and kind of, manage and just be very flexible and agile. For larger enterprises, I mean, especially non-tech enterprises, I think what Chalamayya was saying makes 100% sense. It really comes down to, are you getting any competitive advantage by building instead of buying? If you're building something unique that vendors can't sort of meet the requirements for off the shelf, then okay, yeah, go ahead and build. But if not, just there are tons and tons of tools and enterprise tooling available. It's better to buy and accelerate.
Yeah, and that is helpful. Praveen, the question I have for you is, can you suggest or can you talk a little bit about some of the open source platforms or frameworks that you have found useful in your work, or whether like some of the basic things that you want to suggest here?
So for ETL pipelines and stuff, Airflow is very popular in the tech industry. You could write Spark pipelines, PySpark, Scala, whatever, Hive pipelines. Airflow is really great. I see a lot of companies using Airflow. For model deployment, I see a lot of companies using Spinnaker, MLflow, MLdeploy. These are some technologies that I see companies using for model deployment.
Yeah, go ahead, Maxim.
Just wanted to a little bit continue discussion. So we were all talking about the small startups and the big tech companies. And my question is, when we're talking about the startups, it's always a choice between what to buy or to build. But in some big tech companies, that could be the case when the same product, but from the different vendors used in the different team. So what your thoughts here? Is it okay to have this? Is it better to have the unified architecture across the whole company, or to give some freedom to your teams here?
So from a tech standpoint, I think let me say this. I think there is a trade-off between building in-house versus buying enterprise software. Building in-house requires a lot of engineers, and engineers cost a lot of money. Good engineers cost a lot of money, so it's very expensive to buy it, to build it in-house. And then obviously enterprise software, there is onboarding cost, but once you've onboarded, it's easy to maintain it. So there is a trade-off, constant trade-off between developing in-house versus adopting enterprise software. Now, in regards to whatever my fellow panelists were saying, if we are adopting an enterprise software, then the architecture that we would like to adopt should work for use cases across the company, right? So we want to make sure, for instance, if you're using Databricks, we want to ensure that it works for all the teams across the company. So in that sense, the design that we want to adopt should be modular, as Razi was referring to a while ago.
Yeah, and so I'd like to spend some last minutes of this panel while discussing the data security, privacy, and governance, because I think it is like a huge part of data management and the topic. So I believe, like, for example, working for the public administration, it is always #1 priority for all of us to have that data security and privacy intact. We have a lot of data sets where you have publicly identifiable information, the PIIs. We have to make sure that we are following all the protocols that city, even the federal government in some cases, are putting forward. So whenever we are using any kind of model development or deployment, it is always important for us to understand that security, and as Razi said, like data governance is again important. Who is the owner of data? Who should have the access to it? What should be the level of access? Should he have access to like edit the data or just use the data? Who should have the viewing access? And the second part is how we make sure that we are doing this in a transparent manner. So I think this is something that is very important for us as well. I know Maxim initially talked about the synthetic data. So I want to hear your perspective on this entire security, privacy, and data governance, and then we'll add every other panelist.
Well, yeah, just to add here, so I think all the like data governance have to be specified in the policy of the company, otherwise it will be like a mess. Speaking about the usage of some data that is like impossible to collect somewhere abroad, yes, one of the approaches is like to use the synthetic data, but and use like different generative models that are pretty popular right now. Unfortunately, right now they are pretty limited with the number of the templates that they use, so it's always better, like not in terms of like the PI information, but in terms of like less sensitive data, it's better to use the hybrid approach of the synthetic data, the data from your logs or from your company, from your products, and the data collected especially for this product. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And then, yeah, Chalamayya, do you want to?
So security, again, is a key component of any enterprise. One way we got to that place, again, we are still in the journey. Everyone is in the same place, is leveraging a concept called data virtualization, where I just mentioned about framework. So data virtualization is our core component on how do we consume the data, because that is where you have to govern, audit on who is using the data and why are they using the data. It could be dashboard, it could be an AI model, or it could be some other customization on top of that. So we use data virtualization as a key layer for every consumption of any data from any data store, be it a lake, be it a warehouse. We haven't gone to transactional systems yet, but we would like to go there on who is sourcing the data, who is building warehouses, who is consuming the data. So data virtualization has been the central part of our entire framework because it's centrally managed, it is secured, it is authorized, it's governed. So you don't have a way out unless you hack into the system and get a backdoor entry. But that is how we are leveraging or trying to improve the security and the governance aspects of data at an enterprise.
Razi, do you want to add to this point?
Yeah, I think so one of the areas that folks don't think about is especially when it comes to ML, you've created features. These are data inputs into ML models. You need to govern and manage those as well. You need to still have privacy around and security around all of the features. Lineage to make sure that you're again figuring out who's using what features in which types of models. So just as you were thinking about extending your architectures to doing ML and ML pipelining as well, just think about how you extend some of the security governance, etc., into feature pipelines as well. One other comment I would just make is keep everything modular, innovate a lot. But when it comes to security, privacy, governance, try to keep things as sort of straitjacketed as possible because, the fewer exceptions, the better the overall management is.
Yeah, and I can totally relate to this point because, like, for example, the city of Austin has 25 different departments, including like the public utility, water utility. So we have a lot of like smaller enterprises within the one city. So it is very important to have like a constant security protocols, the privacy and everything intact, and making sure that it is uniform across. So as you grow your organization or your enterprise, it is very important to have that guidelines, security protocols, privacy, all of it intact. So I'll let Praveen wrap it up with like some conclusion around it.
To give a concrete example on what Razi was saying around privacy pertaining to features, right? This has impacted companies such as Pinterest, Facebook, all social media companies that generate most of their revenues through advertising. This is in light of the changes that Apple brought in the iOS 14 rollout. So you probably got a notification on your iPhone saying, hey, do you want this app to track your off-site behavior or something along those lines. So, as a machine learning engineer, what I essentially try to, want to predict is based on your behavior, based on what you're doing on the web, I want to predict how likely you're going to make a purchase, right? Let's say you see a Walmart ad. How likely is this person going to make a purchase on Walmart? So what I would essentially be tracking there is the number of times that you visited Walmart from, let's say, Facebook's portal. So now if you've opted out from not being tracked, I won't have access to this information. So in some sense, I'm constrained in the kind of ads that I can show. I'm going to do a poor job at personalizing content to you. And the model's predictions would also go down because now if you've opted out, this feature is essentially a null when you're making a prediction. So consequently, you would make less predictions. And the impact that this would have on advertisers is, now since I'm making less predictions, if you look at how auction dynamics works, the bids go up. So advertisers have to pay more. Advertisers are paying more, which essentially, but the conversions are going down, right? Because now I'm not doing a good job at making these predictions of conversion rates. So eventually, long story short, this leads to lower ROAS. If you know what ROAS is, it's revenue over ad spend for advertisers. So they're getting a low ROI. Consequently, advertisers start scaling down their spend, which essentially means social media companies are going to make less money out of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think like what I'm hearing is like a trade-off between sharing your data versus like the kind of features that you can get. So like, for example, if you share everything with like these companies are going to give you better products, but they are also taking your data. So basically, when you are not buying the product, you are the product. I think this is like the common theme that we are hearing with this. So yeah, I think like this was pretty interesting. I'll let Chalamayya add if you want to add something on this.
No, nothing much. Just as Razi and other panelists said, just make it more modular, make it more flexible, and always provide a room to grow on how you structure, organize, manage, and consume the data.
Yeah, thank you. Maxim, any final thoughts?
No, it was like very good said.
Okay, Razi?
Time for lunch.
Okay. And then thank you everyone for attending, and I hope you got to hear something new that is useful for you. So thank you everyone.